Robert Harrison lived his life like clockwork. Every morning at 7 sharp, he would wake up in his expensive downtown apartment. By 8, he was already dressed in one of his perfectly pressed suits. His breakfast was always the same: black coffee and a protein bar eaten while checking emails on his phone. The walk to his office took exactly 12 minutes. Robert had timed it. He liked knowing exactly what to expect. His tech company demanded precision, and he brought that same energy to every part of his life. Meetings were scheduled down to the minute. Phone calls had clear start and end times. Even his lunch break followed the same pattern every single day. At 12:30, Robert would leave his glass office on the 20th floor and walk 3 blocks to Tony's Cafe. It was a small place tucked between 2 tall buildings. Nothing fancy, but they made a decent sandwich and the coffee was strong. More importantly, it was quiet. Most of the business crowd went to the flashier places with their long lines and loud music. Robert preferred the peace. He always sat at the same corner table by the window. From there, he could watch people hurry by on the sidewalk while he ate his turkey sandwich and reviewed reports on his tablet. It was efficient. 30 minutes later, he would be back at his desk, ready for the afternoon meetings. This routine had worked perfectly for 3 years. Robert liked predictable. Predictable was safe. Predictable meant no surprises, no complications, no messy emotions getting in the way of business. But Tuesday started differently. The rain came down in heavy sheets, the kind that soaks through your jacket in seconds. Robert had forgotten his umbrella, something that almost never happened. He was already annoyed as he hurried toward Tony's, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles. When he reached the cafe, he stopped short. Someone was sitting in his usual spot under the green awning, not inside the cafe but huddled against the brick wall where he normally walked past without a second thought. It was a girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old. Her dark hair hung in wet strings around her face. She wore a thin jacket that had seen better days and jeans with holes that didn't look like the fashionable kind. Next to her sat a piece of cardboard, soggy from the rain, with words written in black marker that were starting to run. Robert squinted to read the sign. Anything helps. God bless. Most days Robert would have walked straight past. He had places to be, a schedule to keep. The city was full of people asking for help, and he had learned long ago that you couldn't save everyone. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way the girl sat so still, not calling out to people passing by like others did. She wasn't aggressive or demanding. She just sat there quietly, as if she didn't really expect anyone to stop. There was something dignified about it that caught his attention. Or maybe it was her eyes. When she looked up at him, Robert felt his chest tighten. Her eyes were green, the kind of bright green that seemed to glow even in the gray light of the storm. They reminded him of someone else, someone he tried not to think about too often. His sister Katie had eyes like that. Robert shook his head, trying to clear the thought. Katie had been gone for 5 years now. The overdose had taken her quickly, but not before addiction had stolen years of her life. Those same bright green eyes had looked at him from hospital beds and rehab centers, always hopeful, always believing things would get better. The girl under the awning wasn't Katie. She was just another person down on her luck in a city full of them. Robert should keep walking. He had a sandwich waiting inside and reports to review. Instead, he heard himself saying, Are you hungry? The girl blinked in surprise, as if she hadn't expected anyone to actually speak to her. She nodded slowly. Come on, Robert said, gesturing toward the cafe door. Let's get you something to eat. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully picked up her cardboard sign and followed him inside. Tony looked up from behind the counter with raised eyebrows but didn't say anything. Robert was a regular, and regular customers got the benefit of the doubt. They sat at his usual corner table, though now it felt different somehow. The girl kept her jacket on and her hands folded in her lap. She seemed nervous, like she might bolt for the door at any moment. What's your name? Robert asked. Maya, she said quietly. I'm Robert. What would you like to eat? Maya glanced at the menu board behind the counter. I don't want to cost you too much. Don't worry about that. Get whatever you want. She ordered a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup. Simple food. But she ate it like it was the best meal she'd ever had. Robert found himself watching her, remembering how Katie used to wolf down food during her brief clean periods as if she was storing up energy for the hard times ahead. How old are you, Maya? He asked. 16. Well, 17 in 2 months. Where's your family? Maya shrugged. Don't really have one. I was in foster care until I turned 18 last month. She paused, then added, well, I lied about being 16. I'm actually 18, but people are nicer to younger kids, you know. Robert felt something twist in his stomach. 18 years old and sleeping on the streets. When he was 18, his biggest worry was which college to attend. What happened? He asked gently. Nothing dramatic, Maya said, stirring her soup. I just aged out of the system. My last foster home was okay, but they couldn't keep me once I wasn't getting state money anymore. I tried to get a job, but it's hard when you don't have an address or nice clothes for interviews. Most places take one look at me and decide I'm trouble. She spoke matter-of-factly without self-pity. Robert found that somehow harder to take than if she had been crying or asking for sympathy. Where are you staying? Wherever I can. There's a shelter about 10 blocks from here, but it fills up fast. Sometimes I sleep in the park or find a doorway that's not too cold. Robert thought about his apartment with its 3 empty bedrooms and felt ashamed of how much space he wasted. They talked for another 20 minutes. Maya was smart, Robert realized. She had finished high school while bouncing between foster homes. She loved to read and spent a lot of time in the public library where it was warm and quiet. She wanted to be a writer someday, though she laughed when she said it like it was an impossible dream. When lunch was over, Robert walked with her back to the spot under the awning. The rain had stopped, but puddles still reflected the gray sky. Thank you, Maya said. That was really kind of you. Robert surprised himself by saying, same time tomorrow? Maya looked at him with those green eyes that reminded him so much of Katie. You don't have to do that. I know, Robert said, but I want to. If you want to, I mean. She nodded, a small smile crossing her face for the first time since he'd met her. Okay, same time tomorrow. As Robert walked back to his office, he couldn't stop thinking about Maya sitting alone under that awning. For the first time in years, his perfectly scheduled day felt like it was missing something important. He found himself looking forward to tomorrow's lunch in a way that had nothing to do with turkey, sandwiches, or business reports. He had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change both their lives forever. Robert woke up the next morning thinking about Maya. He tried to push the thought away as he went through his usual routine, but her face kept coming back to him. Those green eyes that looked so much like Katie's. The way she had eaten that grilled cheese sandwich like it was the most precious thing in the world. All morning, he found himself checking the clock. His assistant noticed him tapping his pen during meetings, something he never did. By noon, Robert was genuinely nervous. What if Maya didn't show up? What if she had moved on to somewhere else? What if she thought he was just some rich guy playing games? At 12:30 sharp, Robert left his office. He walked the same 3 blocks, but today felt different. His heart was beating faster than usual. When he turned the corner toward Tony's cafe, he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Maya was there, sitting in the same spot under the green awning. She had cleaned up a bit. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail and her clothes looked a little neater. When she saw him coming, she stood up and gave him a small wave. I wasn't sure you'd really come, she said. I told you I would, Robert replied, then felt awkward about how formal that sounded. I mean, I wanted to. Are you ready for lunch? They went inside and sat at the same corner table. This time, Maya seemed more relaxed. She ordered a chicken sandwich and actually made eye contact with Tony when she thanked him. Robert found himself smiling at small things like the way she carefully arranged her napkin on her lap, or how she took small, deliberate bites instead of wolfing down her food. So, what do you do? Maya asked. Besides buy lunch for random people on the street? Robert laughed. I run a tech company. We make software for hospitals to manage patient records more efficiently. That sounds important, Maya said, but probably pretty stressful. It can be. There's always another problem to solve, another deadline to meet. Sometimes I feel like I'm running on a treadmill that never stops. Maya nodded thoughtfully. I've been reading about that. There was this article in a magazine someone left at the library about how successful people often feel empty inside even when they have everything they thought they wanted. Robert paused with his sandwich halfway to his mouth. You read psychology magazines? I read everything, Maya said with a shrug. The library is warm and quiet and they don't kick you out as long as you're actually reading. I've probably read more books in the past 6 months than most people read in years. When you don't have a TV or a phone or anywhere to go, books become your best friends. Over the next few days, Robert discovered just how much Maya had been reading. She could discuss philosophy like she had a college degree. She knew about current events, history, literature, even science. Her insights were sharp and often surprising. "You know what I noticed about people?" Maya said during their fourth lunch together. "Rich people and poor people aren't really that different. They're both worried about the same things, just on different scales." "What do you mean?" "Rich people worry about losing their money. Poor people worry about not having any. Rich people stress about their expensive cars breaking down. Poor people stress about not having bus fare. It's all the same fear, just wearing different clothes." Robert found himself thinking about that conversation for days. Maya had a way of cutting through complicated ideas and finding the simple truth underneath. She saw things he had never noticed, even though he walked through the same city every day. As the weeks passed, their lunch meetings became the part of Robert's day he looked forward to most. Maya would be waiting for him with stories about the people she had met, the books she had read, or something interesting she had overheard at the library. She had started carrying a small notebook where she wrote down observations and thoughts. "What kind of things do you write?" Robert asked one day. Maya hesitated, then opened her notebook to a random page. "Like this. Today I watched a businessman drop his wallet. 3 people saw it happen. The first person pretended not to notice. The second person thought about picking it up but kept walking. The third person was a little girl who ran after him to return it. I think we lose something important when we grow up. We learn too much about what we might lose and forget about what we might give." Robert stared at her. "Maya, that's beautiful. You should be a writer." "Right," Maya laughed, but not in a mean way. "Homeless kids don't become writers. We become statistics." "Says who?" "Says everyone. Says the system. Says the way people look at me when I walk down the street." Robert felt anger rising in his chest, but not at Maya. At the world that had convinced this brilliant girl that her dreams were impossible. "The system doesn't get to decide what you become. You do." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "You really believe that?" "I do." Something shifted between them that day. Maya started sharing more of her writing, and Robert found himself telling her about his own struggles. He talked about the pressure of running a company, about employees who depended on him for their livelihoods, about board meetings where one wrong decision could cost millions of dollars. "Do you have any family?" Maya asked one afternoon. Robert's face tightened. "I had a sister, Katie. She died 5 years ago." "I'm sorry." "What happened?" "Drugs. She got addicted to painkillers after a car accident, and then it just got worse from there. I tried to help her, sent her to rehab 3 times, but she couldn't stay clean. One day I got a call from the hospital saying she was gone." Maya reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. "That must have been terrible. The worst part was feeling like I failed her. I had all this money, all these resources, but I couldn't save my own sister. What's the point of being successful if you can't protect the people you love?" "Maybe that's not your job," Maya said gently. "Maybe your job is just to love them and let them know they matter. Everything else is up to them." Robert looked at this 18-year-old girl who had every reason to be bitter about the world, and somehow she was comforting him about his guilt and grief. "When did you get so wise?" "When you have nothing but time to think and observe, you learn things," Maya said. "Plus, being invisible has advantages. People don't notice you're listening, so you hear a lot of truth." Robert realized that somewhere along the way, these lunches had stopped being charity. Maya wasn't just someone he was helping. She was becoming his friend, maybe the first real friend he'd had in years. She listened to him without judgment, challenged his thinking without being confrontational, and made him laugh in ways he had almost forgotten. Meanwhile, Maya was changing too. She sat straighter, spoke with more confidence, and smiled more often. The scared, wet girl from that first rainy day was still there. But now Robert could see the strong, intelligent woman she was becoming. Neither of them realized it yet, but they were saving each other in ways that had nothing to do with money or food or shelter. They were reminding each other what it meant to be human, to connect, to matter to someone else. And that was worth more than either of them had ever imagined. After 2 months of daily lunches, Robert started noticing things about Maya that worried him. Like how she would save half her sandwich, wrapping it carefully in napkins before putting it in her small backpack, or how she never ordered anything to drink besides water, even though he always offered. "Why don't you get a soda or coffee?" he asked one day. Maya shrugged. "Water's fine. It's free, and I don't want to waste your money." Robert felt something twist in his chest. Here was this brilliant girl rationing food and refusing a $1 soft drink because she was worried about his budget. He made more money in an hour than most people spent on food in a week. That afternoon, Robert found himself standing in the grocery store near his apartment, staring at the shelves. He had an idea, but he had to be careful about how he did it. Maya had pride, and the last thing he wanted was to make her feel like a charity case. The next day at lunch, Robert ordered his usual turkey sandwich, then paused and said to Tony, "Actually, make that 2 turkey sandwiches and 2 of those chocolate chip cookies. I'm really hungry today." When the food came, Robert ate about half of his sandwich, then pushed the plate away. "I guess my eyes were bigger than my stomach. Maya, do you want this? I hate to see it go to waste." Maya looked at him suspiciously. "Robert, you eat the same turkey sandwich every day. I've never seen you not finish it." "Maybe I had a big breakfast," he said, trying to look innocent. Maya smiled and shook her head, but she took the sandwich. And the cookie. "You're a terrible liar, you know that? I have no idea what you're talking about." This became their pattern. Robert would mysteriously order too much food, or claim he wasn't as hungry as he thought, or remember at the last minute that he had a business dinner planned. Maya would roll her eyes at his obvious lies, but she always took the extra food. It was a game they both played, allowing Robert to help while letting Maya keep her dignity. But Maya was proud, and she wasn't content to just take without giving something back. She started arriving at their lunch spot with small gifts. The first was a flower she had picked from a park, a bright yellow daisy that had somehow survived the early autumn weather. "What's this for?" Robert asked, twirling the flower between his fingers. "You buy me lunch every day. The least I can do is brighten up your table," Maya said, looking embarrassed. "I know it's not much." Robert felt his throat tighten. When was the last time anyone had given him a flower? When was the last time anyone had given him anything that wasn't expected or calculated? "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. The next day, Maya brought him a smooth stone she had found by the river. "I thought you might like it for your desk," she said. "Sometimes when I'm stressed, I hold on to something solid, and it helps me feel more grounded." Robert carried that stone in his pocket for the rest of the week. During tense board meetings, he would run his thumb over its smooth surface and think about Maya's words about feeling grounded. It worked better than any stress management technique he had ever learned. Maya's gifts became a regular part of their lunches. A particularly interesting leaf she had found, a small origami crane folded from a piece of newspaper, a quote she had copied from a book because it made her think of him. None of these things cost money, but they were worth more to Robert than any expensive present he had ever received. Meanwhile, Robert found other ways to help without being obvious about it. When the weather started getting colder, he began taking different routes to lunch, always happening to pass stores that sold winter clothing. He would stop and look at jackets in the window, then shake his head and mutter about how he already had too many coats at home. "There's a perfectly good sleeping bag in my closet, too," he said one day as if he was talking to himself. "From that camping trip I never took, just taking up space." The next morning, Maya's usual spot under the awning had a new addition. A high-quality sleeping bag, still in its packaging with a note that said "Free to Good Home." Maya looked at Robert suspiciously when he arrived for lunch. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you?" she asked. "About what?" Robert said, examining his fingernails with exaggerated innocence. "The sleeping bag that just happened to appear overnight." Must have been one of those mysterious Good Samaritans you hear about. The city's full of them." Maya laughed despite herself. "Right. Mysterious Good Samaritans who buy the exact same brand of expensive outdoor gear that you mentioned researching last week. What a coincidence, Robert said solemnly. The sleeping bag was followed by a warm jacket that someone had apparently donated to the same spot, then a pair of dye boots that were exactly Maya's size. Each time Robert played dumb, and each time Maya pretended to believe him. But Maya was observant and she started noticing other things too. Like how Robert would mention homeless individuals he had seen on his way to work, people who seemed to be struggling more than most. Somehow these same people would find small amounts of help appearing in their lives. A bag of groceries left where they slept. A gift card to a local restaurant tucked into a doorway they frequented. You know, Maya said one day, there seem to be a lot of mysterious Good Samaritans in this city lately. It's a generous city, Robert replied, not meeting her eyes. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook, different from the one where she wrote her observations. This one was newer with a bright blue cover. I want to show you something, she said. I've been keeping track of all the people you've helped. Not just me. All of them. Robert's eyes widened as Maya flipped through pages covered with her neat handwriting, names, dates, descriptions of help that had appeared in people's lives. She had been watching, connecting the dots, seeing the pattern of kindness that Robert thought he had hidden. Maya, I don't know what you're talking about. Old Pete by the subway station hasn't missed a meal in 6 weeks, ever since you started taking the long way to work. The woman with the baby who sits by the library found a bag of diapers and formula every Tuesday like clockwork. The veteran by the park somehow always has enough money for his medication. Robert felt heat rise in his cheeks. Even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, why are you keeping track? Maya's eyes were serious now. Because I want to understand why. You're not doing this for tax breaks or good publicity. You're not even doing it so people will thank you. Most of them don't even know it's you. So why? Robert was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. I used to think success meant accumulating things. Money, property, achievements. But after Katie died, I realized I had built this life where I was surrounded by stuff but completely alone. I had everything and nothing at the same time. He looked at Maya, this girl who had nothing but somehow seemed to have figured out what he was just learning. You've taught me something. You've shown me that the most important things can't be bought or sold. They can only be shared. Maya reached across the table and took his hand. You saved my life, Robert. Not with the food or the sleeping bag or any of that stuff. You saved me by seeing me as a person worth knowing. Do you understand how rare that is? Robert squeezed her hand, thinking about how this strange friendship had become the most important relationship in his life. Neither of them knew that their secret acts of kindness were about to lead to something even more wonderful. Something that would change everything once again. For now, it was enough to sit in their corner of Tony's cafe, two unlikely friends who had found in each other what they had both been missing. Someone who truly understood what it meant to care. 3 months into their daily lunch meetings, Maya seemed different. She was more distracted than usual, glancing at her watch and fidgeting with her notebook. Robert noticed she had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping well. Everything okay? He asked, cutting his sandwich in half as he always did to share with her. Yeah, fine, Maya said, but she was clearly not fine. She kept looking toward the library down the street, as if she needed to be somewhere else. Maya, what's going on? You can tell me. She hesitated for a moment, then opened her notebook. But instead of flipping to her usual observations about people and life, she turned to a section in the back that Robert had never seen before. The pages were covered with her neat handwriting, but these weren't random thoughts. They looked like full articles. I've been writing more, she said quietly. Not just the little observations I usually show you. Real pieces. About things I've experienced and seen. Robert leaned forward, interested. Can I read one? Maya bit her lip nervously. They're probably not very good. I mean, I've never taken a real writing class or anything. Let me be the judge of that. With shaking hands, Maya turned to a page titled, The Invisible People. She slid the notebook across the table to Robert, then looked away as if she couldn't bear to watch him read it. Robert began reading, and within the first paragraph he felt his breath catch. Maya's writing was powerful, raw and honest in a way that most professional journalists never achieved. She wrote about the homeless community not as statistics or problems to be solved, but as real people with real stories. She described old Pete, the veteran by the subway station who talked to his dead wife every morning, before asking for spare change. She wrote about the woman with the baby who sang lullabies in 3 languages, each one a reminder of the home she had lost. She captured the daily struggles but also the moments of kindness, humor, and hope that happened between people who had been forgotten by the rest of society. "Maya," Robert said, looking up at her with wide eyes. "This is extraordinary." "Really?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "I'm serious. This is some of the best writing I've ever read." "You have a gift." Maya's cheeks flushed pink. "I don't know about that." "I do. I know people in publishing, journalists who've been writing for decades, and most of them would kill to write with this kind of authenticity and power." Robert flipped through more pages, each article better than the last. "Maya, why haven't you shown me this before?" "Because it felt too personal, I guess. And because I didn't want you to think I was trying to get something from you. Like maybe I was being your friend just so you'd help me with my writing career or something." Robert felt a pang in his chest. Even now, after months of friendship, Maya still worried that people might think she had ulterior motives. "You know that's not how I see you, right? You're not some project to me. You're my friend. One of the best friends I've ever had." "I know," Maya said, smiling a little. "That's why I finally decided to show you. I trust you." Over the next few lunches, Maya shared more of her writing. She had pieces about the different types of hunger, not just for food, but for dignity, for purpose, for connection. She wrote about the way society looked through homeless people as if they were ghosts, and how that invisibility could sometimes be a kind of superpower, letting you see truths that others missed. "You should submit this somewhere," Robert said after reading an article about the small miracles that happened on the streets every day. "Newspapers, magazines, online publications. People need to read this." "Right." Maya laughed, but not unkindly. "Like anyone would publish work by a homeless teenager with no credentials. They would if they saw how good you are. Robert, I appreciate your confidence in me, I really do. But the writing world doesn't work that way. You need connections, education, experience. You need to look the part." Robert wanted to argue, but he knew Maya was right about how unfair the world could be. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that talent like hers deserved to be seen. What Robert didn't know was that Maya had been thinking the same thing. For the past few weeks, she had been spending extra hours at the library, not just reading but researching. She had discovered scholarship programs, writing contests, and opportunities for people from disadvantaged backgrounds. One program in particular had caught her attention: the Future Voices Scholarship for emerging writers who had overcome significant challenges. The scholarship provided full funding for college, including tuition, room and board, and even a living stipend. Winners also got their work published in a national magazine. The application was due in 2 weeks. Maya had been working on her submission essay every night, writing by the light of her phone when she couldn't make it to the library. She hadn't told Robert because she was afraid of getting his hopes up along with her own. And if she was being honest with herself, she was also afraid of being disappointed again. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said during lunch one Tuesday. "If you could go back and do anything differently with your life, what would it be?" Robert thought for a moment. "I think I would have focused less on accumulating success and more on building real relationships earlier. I spent so many years climbing ladders that I forgot to notice the people around me." He paused. "Why do you ask?" "I've been thinking about second chances lately, about whether it's ever too late to change your story. Maya, you're 18 years old. Your story is just beginning. But what if the beginning is too messy? What if people only see where I came from and not where I want to go?" Robert reached across the table and touched her hand. "Then those people are idiots. Anyone who takes the time to really know you can see how special you are." Maya squeezed his hand. "Promise me something?" "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll keep helping people. Not because of me, but because you've discovered something about yourself that makes you happy." "Why are you talking like you're going somewhere?" "I'm not. I just want to make sure you remember that the good you do matters, even when no one's watching." That night, Maya sat in the library until closing time, putting the finishing touches on her scholarship essay. She wrote about finding hope in unexpected places, about the power of human kindness to transform lives, and about her dream of using her voice to speak for those who had been silenced. She wrote about a millionaire who had seen her not as a problem to be solved, but as a person worth knowing. She didn't use Robert's name, But she poured her heart into describing how one person's consistent kindness had helped her remember her own worth. The next morning, Maya walked to the post office and mailed her application. As she dropped the envelope into the slot, she whispered a small prayer to whatever forces might be listening. She had done everything she could. Now all she could do was wait and hope that somewhere out there, someone would see in her what Robert had seen. What she didn't know was that her waiting period was about to end in the most wonderful way possible, and that Robert's faith in her abilities was about to be proven absolutely right. 6 weeks had passed since Maya mailed her scholarship application. Every day, Robert noticed her checking the time more frequently, her eyes darting toward the library where she went to use the internet. She tried to hide her nervousness, but he could see it in the way she fidgeted with her notebook and barely touched her food. "Any word yet?" Robert asked gently on a crisp October afternoon. "They said applicants would hear back by the end of the month," Maya replied, stirring her soup without eating it. "That's still a week away." "Maya, you're going to make yourself sick with worry. I know it's silly to get my hopes up. There are probably thousands of applicants, and most of them have advantages I don't. Better education, more stable backgrounds, letters of recommendation from teachers who actually know them." Robert wanted to tell her that talent like hers couldn't be taught in classrooms, but he had learned that Maya needed to work through her fears in her own way. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the smooth stone she had given him months ago. "Remember what you told me about this?" he asked, setting it on the table between them. Maya smiled for the first time that day. "That when you're stressed, holding on to something solid helps you feel grounded. It works. I've carried this thing into every important meeting since you gave it to me. It reminds me that the most valuable things in life can't be measured in dollars. You're just trying to make me feel better." "Maybe. Is it working?" Before Maya could answer, her phone buzzed. She rarely got calls, so they both looked at it in surprise. Maya's face went pale when she saw the unfamiliar number. "What if it's them?" she whispered. "Only one way to find out," Robert said. With trembling fingers, Maya answered the call. "Hello?" Robert watched her face as she listened. Her expression went from nervous to confused to shocked to something that looked like pure joy. But she was trying so hard not to get excited that she looked like she might explode. "Yes," she said into the phone. "Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much." She hung up and stared at Robert with tears streaming down her face. "Maya, what happened?" "I won," she whispered. "I actually won." Robert felt his own eyes fill with tears. "The scholarship?" Maya nodded, then let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob. "Full scholarship to State University. Tuition, room and board, living expenses, everything. And Robert, they want to publish my essay. In their magazine. It goes out to over 1 million people." Robert jumped up from his chair and pulled Maya into a hug, right there in the middle of Tony's cafe. Other customers turned to look, but he didn't care. This brilliant, incredible girl was getting the chance she deserved. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you could do it." The woman on the phone said my essay was one of the most powerful pieces they'd ever received. She said the selection committee was unanimous. "They want me to speak at the scholarship ceremony next month." Maya pulled back from the hug, wiping her eyes. "Robert, I never could have done this without you. Not just the food and the encouragement, but everything. You helped me remember that I was worth something. Maya, this was all you. Your talent, your hard work, your courage to apply. I just bought you some sandwiches." "No," Maya said firmly. "You did so much more than that. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You treated me like I mattered before I even believed it myself." They sat back down, both of them grinning and crying at the same time. Tony brought over 2 cups of coffee on the house, claiming it was to celebrate. Though Robert suspected Maya had told him about her writing dreams during one of her trips to use the bathroom. "So what's the plan now?" Robert asked. "I start in January. They're letting me move into the dorms early so I have time to get settled. The journalism program is one of the best in the state." Maya paused, suddenly looking sad. "I guess this means our daily lunches are going to end." Robert felt a sharp pang at the thought, but it was mixed with overwhelming pride.
"It's not ending, Maya. It's just changing."
"You're going to do incredible things. What about you? What are you going to do without someone to share your mysteriously extra sandwiches with?" Robert had been thinking about this for weeks, actually. "I've been talking to some lawyers about setting up a foundation, something focused on helping homeless youth get education and job training. I want to make sure other people get the chances you're getting. Maya's eyes went wide. Really? Really? And I was hoping you might consider being my advisor. Help me understand what kinds of programs would actually make a difference. You want me to help run a foundation? Maya, you understand this issue better than any expert I could hire. You know what people need, not just what looks good on paper. Over the next hour, they talked about Maya's plans for university and Robert's ideas for the foundation. Maya would study journalism with a focus on social issues. She wanted to write stories that gave voices to people who had been silenced. Robert would start with small programs, maybe scholarships for kids aging out of foster care, job training programs, transitional housing. You know what I realized? Maya said as they prepared to leave the cafe. A year ago, I thought my story was over before it really began. I thought being homeless meant I was broken somehow, like I had failed at life before I even got started. And now? Now I know that was just the first chapter. Everything that happened to me, all the hard stuff, it wasn't the end of my story. It was just preparing me to write something better. Robert thought about his own life a year ago. He had been successful but empty, surrounded by achievements that felt hollow. Meeting Maya had reminded him what really mattered, what success actually looked like. You changed my life too, you know, he said. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I was just going through the motions. You showed me what it means to really live. As they walked back to Maya's spot under the awning to collect her things, Robert marveled at how much had changed. In a few months, Maya would be living in a dorm room, attending classes, pursuing her dreams. The cardboard sign and sleeping bag would be replaced by textbooks and a laptop. But the most important change couldn't be seen. Maya now knew her worth, understood her power, believed in her future. And Robert had rediscovered his heart, remembered that the best parts of life couldn't be bought or earned, only shared. Same time tomorrow? Robert asked, just like he had on that first rainy day. Maya smiled, the same smile that had been growing brighter every day for months. Same time tomorrow, at least until January. As Robert walked back to his office, he realized that the wonderful thing that had happened wasn't just Maya getting the scholarship. It was the discovery that two people from completely different worlds could find in each other exactly what they both needed most. Proof that they mattered, that their lives had meaning, that kindness really could change everything. Sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come disguised as ordinary moments. A daily lunch, a simple conversation, the choice to see someone who others overlook. In Maya's case, it had led to a scholarship and a bright future. In Robert's case, it had led to a purpose larger than himself. Both of them had learned that the most wonderful things happen when we choose to care about each other, one lunch at a time.